I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today, and I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. So, hi everyone and welcome. I'm really glad you're here today because we're diving into a topic that can make a huge difference in how our learners experience training. Creating safe, respectful and inclusive learning spaces. So for those who don't know me, I'm Nerida. I'm the lead trainer and assessor here at TAE Institute. And why do I think this is so important? Well, every learner who walks into our classrooms or onto our online platform brings their own story, their own background and their own goals. And so when we get that environment right, when learners feel respected, supported and like they belong, we see their confidence grow, their engagement rise and their success follows. And here's the great part. As trainers and assessors, we get to shape that environment every single day. And it's not just about compliance or ticking boxes. It's about creating real opportunities for learners to thrive. So today, we're going to explore some practical ways we can do that through cultural safety, trauma-informed practice, universal design for learning, looking at learner feedback, and building our own capability. I'm really looking forward to sharing these ideas with you. Now, if you have any thoughts, questions, or suggestions, just pop them into the chat box and I'll respond to you after the session. And yes, there will be a copy of the slides and you will get a certificate after the end of this presentation. Okay, so let's jump in. When we talk about cultural safety, people often think straight away about First Nation learners or students from multicultural backgrounds. And look, that's absolutely important. But cultural safety is not just for those groups, it's for everyone in the room. And instead of us saying white students, which can sound a bit blunt, we might talk about learners from the majority culture or from Anglo-Australian backgrounds. The point is that every learner brings their own experience, their values, and their ways of learning, whether they grew up in a remote farming community in the city or in a migrant household. Cultural safety is about recognising those differences and making sure that no one feels left out, stereotyped or ignored. And it's not just a case of this group gets cultural safety and that group doesn't. It's about creating an environment where every learner, whether from a minority culture or mainstream, feels respected, included, and able to succeed. I think a truly inclusive approach means recognising and valuing differences wherever it shows up. Cultural safety isn't about singling out one group for special treatment and ignoring others. It's about making sure that every learner feels respected, free from judgment, and able to take part fully in the learning. In practice, that means maybe changing how we teach to suit different learning styles, being flexible with support when people need it, or calling out unconscious bias that affects everyone. If we move away from the idea that one size fits all, we create a learning space where cultural safety really does extend to everyone. And that includes learners from minority groups and learners from majority culture too. Because each person's identity, perspective, and needs matters in that learning environment. So, talking about cultural safety and inclusion, it's easy to focus on race or ethnicity, but it's actually much broader than that. Cultural safety is about challenging assumptions we make about gender, age, class, disability, or even where somebody comes from. Think about it this way. We've got a woman starting out in a trade course. Now, she might face comments or attitudes that suggest that she really doesn't belong there. That's not too different from a First Nations student walking into a law course. and being made to feel that they're out of place. In both cases, the message is the same: you don't fit here. And that's exactly what cultural safety is trying to prevent. As trainers and assessors, we have a big role to play. We set the tone by making it clear right from the start that respect is the standard. And if something inappropriate is said, we address it straight away. We show inclusiveness in the way we speak and interact. And we make sure every learner knows their voice and their presence is valued. And when we do this, it kind of rubs off on the whole group, doesn't it? Students start to mirror that behaviour. And before too long, we've got a classroom or an online session where everyone feels like they belong, no matter who they are or where they come from. We also look then at community obligations. And community obligations isn't limited to recognising the obligations of First Nations or multicultural students. All learners have personal or community responsibilities that are important to them. These may include attending religious observance, community events, family responsibilities, or communities related to work or regional life. A culturally safe learning environment respects these obligations and supports students to balance them with their study. Trainers and assessors can demonstrate this by showing understanding, offering flexibility, and working with learners to find fair solutions while maintaining the required standards. Excuse me. This approach reinforces that cultural safety applies to every student. It creates a learning environment where all learners feel respected, valued, and they can participate fully. So none of us comes into a course as a blank slate. We all carry past experiences with us, from school, from work, from community, even from the way we learn things in our personal lives. And those experiences really shape how we see ourselves as learners. So for some people, their past is mostly positive. And they've done well at school, enjoyed workplace training. So they walk into that training environment feeling pretty confident. But for others, the story can be very different. And so if someone struggled at school, felt unsupported, or was left out because of culture, diversity, gender, or class, they might carry a lot of self-doubt and even feel anxiety about a new course. And so that's why in VET, it's so important to recognise where people are coming from. It's not just about delivering the same content. It's about understanding the history each learner brings with them. When we build on their strengths or give extra support where it's needed, we help them to rebuild confidence and stay engaged. And when learners feel that their past is acknowledged and their strengths are valued, they're far more likely to stick with the course, take some risks in their learning, and succeed. I know for me, school was not a great experience. I couldn't wait to finish and get on with what I really wanted to do, which at that time was to be a dance teacher. But years later, when I decided I needed to go back and get a formal qualification, I found the learning environment was so different. This time around, I could see the relevance in what I was learning, and that made all the difference. Suddenly learning had meaning, and I could connect it to where I wanted to go. So let's think about what happens when somebody comes in with a positive past learning experience. It often gives them a head start. They already feel confident in their ability to learn and achieve. And they tend to see education as something valuable and relevant to their goals. So they might already have strategies for study, organisation, or problem solving that they can draw on. Plus, they often have transfer skills they've built before, like literacy, digital skills, or teamwork. And they can build that straight into the new course. Another one, and which is a big one, is resilience. If they've succeeded before, They're more likely to believe they can succeed again, even when things get tough. For example, a learner who had a strong support from their trainer while completing their cert training might walk into a cert or feeling more confident and better able to manage themselves because they know they've done it once and they can do it again. On the other hand, some learners come in carrying negative experiences from past training at school, and this can really shape the way they engage with us. They might have low self-belief, thinking that they're just not good at studying. Assessments, tests, or even group work can cause lots of anxiety. And if they feel unsupported or discriminated against before, they may also carry a level of distrust towards the institution or the trainers. Sometimes this shows up as avoidance behaviours, skipping classes, not asking questions. And it's not because they don't care. It's because they're protecting themselves from feeling judged or failing again. And for some learners, especially those who experience racism, bullying, or exclusion, stepping into a training room can even trigger old trauma responses. So again, an example might be a learner who faced racism at school might approach VET very cautiously, unsure if this new environment will actually be culturally safe. And so that's why the way we set the tone and build trust right from the start is so important. So when we talk about these past learning experiences, it's not just about school. Adults pick up skills and knowledge from all kinds of places, and those experiences matter just as much. Many learners have gained skills in the workplace through on-the-job training, apprenticeships, or informal mentoring. Someone who's been shown how to use the tools, follow safety procedures, or train a new colleague has already been learning, even though it wasn't in the classroom. And community and family life also plays a big role. So if you're volunteering, you've got caring responsibilities, or you're involved in sporting clubs, church groups, cultural organisations, they all build transferable skills like communication, teamwork, planning, problem solving, and even personal experiences like learning how to budget, fixing things at home, or use technology contribute to how confident someone feels about learning new things. So when trainers recognise and value these types of learning, it also sends a strong message. Your knowledge and your experience counts. And so that recognition can boost confidence, increase motivation, and make learners feel their background is an asset, not a barrier. Okay, so when we look at past experiences, how past experience shape adult learners, there's a few key theories that we would need to understand so that we can work out what's really going on. So first up, we've got adult learning theories, and this is from Malcolm Knowles. He reminds us that adults learn best when what they're learning feels relevant, when they're treated with respect, and when their past experiences are recognised as valuable. So in practice, that means connecting what we teach to real-world situations and drawing on the knowledge that learners already bring to the table. Then we've got the constructivist approach, hard word to say. This one says that new learning builds on what people already know. But there's a catch. If learners have gaps or misconceptions, these need to be addressed before we can build anything solid. It's like renovating a house. You've got to check the foundations first. And we also need to think about trauma-informed practice. Research shows that if someone has had a really negative past experience, bullying, discrimination, repeated failure, they step into that learning environment with barriers, and sometimes this can trigger stress responses. And that might look like anxiety, withdrawal, avoiding assessments. So the key here is to create an environment that feels safe, predictable, and supportive, So learners can focus on learning instead of protecting themselves. And finally, there's self-determination theory. This tells us that motivation depends on three big things. We've got autonomy, so having some choice, competence, feeling capable, and relatedness, feeling like you belong. So if past learning knocked these things down, learners might struggle to stay motivated. But if we can support them in these areas, then we're much more likely to see resistance and persistence. And so the training becomes more meaningful. So I think one of the best things we can do for our adult learners is to recognise that experience they bring with them. So we can start valuing experience by using RPL where it's relevant and encourage learners to share examples from their work life. I think we also need to check in early, like our LLND assessments and simple conversations at enrolment help us spot those strengths and gaps before they become barriers. And from there, it's about building confidence, starting with small wins, giving feedback that focuses on that progress as well as outcomes. And offering flexible pathways makes a big difference too. Use scaffolds like templates and examples, and giving assessment options to suit different strengths. And finally, we create a safe and inclusive environment by setting clear ground rules for respect and using trauma-informed approaches like predictability, choice, and collaboration. So let's put these together. And these strategies show learners that their background matters and that they're supported to succeed. And let's have a look at trauma-informed training. So trauma-informed practice starts with the idea that many learners bring the effect of trauma into the training environment. That trauma can come from lots of places. Violence, abuse, discrimination, being displaced, natural disasters, or even intergenerational trauma that's passed down through families and communities. These experiences affect how learners respond to stress, how they interact with others, and even how safe they feel in the classroom. So we need to look at it differently. We need to stop thinking, what's wrong with this learner? And have a trauma-informed approach that asks, what might this learner have experienced and how can I support them to succeed? So the goal isn't to lower the standards or avoid challenge. It's about being mindful of the invisible barriers some people carry and responding with empathy and flexibility so they can fully take part in the learning. And at its heart, trauma-informed practice is about creating a space built on safety, trust, empowerment, and connection. So trauma-informed practice isn't just for learners we know have experienced trauma. It actually benefits everyone. When the learning environment feels safe, supportive, and respectful, learners are more engaged, their anxiety drops, and they're able to perform at their best. And for RTOs, it's not only good practice, it also ticks some boxes for compliance. Compliance with the standards for RTOs, for the child safe principles, and inclusive education frameworks. So, talking about trauma-informed practice, most frameworks, and we've got like the Blue Knot Foundation guidelines and the National Principles for Child Safe Organisations, they highlight 6 core principles that really shape how we work with our learners. So let's go through them. The first is safety. Learners need to feel physically and emotionally safe. So that means let's have predictable routines, clear expectations, and respectful language. Second is trustworthiness and transparency. To be upfront and honest about the rules, the processes, and the assessments. And just important, follow through on what you say you'll do. So the next we have is choice. Give learners some options in how they engage with tasks or assessments and allow flexibility where cultural or personal needs come up. Then we've got collaboration. Involve learners in decisions about their learning and encourage peer support rather than competition. The fifth principle is empowerment. Focus on what learners can do, their strengths and their resilience, and build confidence by giving positive, constructive feedback. And finally, cultural responsiveness. This means recognising the ongoing impact of colonisation and intergenerational trauma, especially for First Nation learners, and embedding cultural knowledge in respectful ways. When these principles come together, we create an environment where learners feel safe, respected, and supported to succeed. So, trauma-informed practice is really about how we create safe and supportive spaces for our learners. So it means using language that highlights strengths rather than focusing on deficits. It's about noticing when a learner might be showing signs of distress. So whether that's withdrawing, losing focus, or even becoming frustrated. And we need to respond with calmness and empathy. It also means knowing when to bring in extra support. Having clear referral pathways to counselling or support services ensures learners can get the help they need. And for us as trainers and assessors, it's about staying up to date, engaging in ongoing professional development about trauma-aware and culturally safe practices so we can continue to support our learners effectively. So, whether it's in the classroom or online, there's some really practical things we can do to make learning feel safe and supportive. Like simple icebreakers and community building activities at the start help build trust. Let's have clear schedules and instructions and consistent routines that give learners a sense of predictability. And it also helps to provide quiet spaces or breakout options if somebody's feeling overwhelmed. And we really do need to be mindful of potential triggers in our content. So, for example, if we've got a case study that's dealing with violence or discrimination, giving a heads up before using that kind of material can make a big difference. And when it comes to assessment, I think flexibility is the key. Learners should have different ways to demonstrate competence. We've got oral, practical, written, as long as they still meet the standards. And that scaffolding, like using checklist templates or practice tasks, can ease anxiety and help learners to prepare. And where it's appropriate, offer some extra time. It can give learners space that they need to show what they can do. As trainers, the language we use makes a big difference in how learners see themselves. If we only focus on what's missing or what they've done wrong, it can chip away at their confidence and their motivation. A strength-based approach means flipping that around. Instead of saying, you're not getting this right, you might say, you've made a really great start here. Now let's look at how we can take that further. It's not about ignoring gaps. It's about framing feedback in ways that shows learners that what they've done well and how they can build on it. That kind of language encourages growth, persistence, and self-belief. And trauma doesn't always look the same for every learner, but there are some common signs we need to be aware of. A learner might suddenly withdraw or lose concentration or show heightened anxiety or even express that frustration or anger. As trainers, our role is to notice these behaviours and then respond in ways that keep the classroom safe. That means staying calm, showing empathy, and trying to understand what might be driving behaviour rather than jumping straight to punishment or judgment. A calm response not only de-escalates the situation, it also shows the learner and the group that this is a safe environment where people will be supported, not shamed, especially when they're struggling. So I think one of the key parts of trauma-informed practice is knowing our limits. As trainers, we're not counsellors or mental health professionals. And so that's why it's important to have referral pathways in place, whether that's counselling services, student support teams, or external support agencies. When a learner needs more specialised help, we need to know where and how to connect them with that support. The other piece is about our own development. Trauma-aware and culturally safe practice isn't a one-off skill. It's something we need to keep building through regular professional development. It might include workshops on trauma-informed education, cultural awareness training, or even sharing strategies with peers. By having clear referral options and committing to our own learning, we're better equipped to keep those learning spaces safe, respectful, and supportive for our learners. There's quite a few resources out there, and as trainers and assessors, we're not expected to know all of the answers. So if you find yourself faced with a situation where a learner's trauma is affecting their participation, it's important to reach out for support. So on this slide, I've got some examples of different support services. The key is to recognise your role to create that safe learning experience and know when to get help from the right people. So let's take a step to the side here and let's talk about different ways that we can create this. You know, once upon a time we talked about VARK, visual, auditory and kinesthetic learners. Now we have Universal Design for Learning, or UDL. So here we're really looking about a shift in how we think about education. The idea is simple but powerful. Barriers to learning don't sit with the learner. They sit in the way we design our teaching, our materials and our assessments. If the design is rigid, some learners are excluded. If the design is flexible, more learners can succeed. So think about it this way. If I only give out learning materials written in English, I've already put up a barrier for anyone who struggles with literacy or has a different language background. But if I provide that same content in multiple ways, like written, visual, audio, or maybe even interactive, learners can engage with it in the way that works best for them. The same goes for assessment. We don't lower the standard, but we open up the ways that learners can demonstrate their skills. One learner might write a report, another might give an oral presentation, and another might show through practical demonstration. They're all meeting the same competency, just in ways that suit their strengths. So when we embed UDL principles into our training, we create learning spaces that are more accessible, culturally responsible, and respectful of diversity. It also means that we don't have to constantly retrofit or make one-off adjustments because flexibility is already built in. It also keeps us aligned with our inclusion and equity requirements. Most importantly, it gives every learner, no matter their background or ability, the chance to fully engage and succeed. When we look at universal design for learning, it helps to break it down into three key areas: the why, the what, and the how. These three areas give us a simple framework for thinking about how learners connect with, process, and demonstrate their learning. So the first one we'll look at is engagement, the why of learning. Engagement is really about how we spark and sustain motivation in our learners. People are far more motivated when they feel genuinely interested in what they're learning. That's a big one, isn't it? When the level of choice in how they take part and when they can see that the content connects with their own lives. As trainers, there's a few simple ways we can support this. We can offer choice and autonomy where possible. For example, letting learners decide how they want to approach a project or a task. We can also work to make learning relevant and meaningful by connecting it to diverse cultural and workplace contexts, so learners can see how it applies beyond the classroom. And finally, engagement is closely tied to that emotional safety. If the environment feels threatening, distracting, or exclusionary, learners won't engage. By minimising those risks and making a space feel welcoming, we create conditions where motivation can grow and be sustained. Okay, second, representation. This is the what of learning. Representation is about how we present the information to our learners. Not everyone takes in information the same way. So if we only deliver it in one format, we risk leaving some learners behind. To make learning accessible, we should provide information in a variety of ways. Written text, visual, audio explanations, and hands-on demonstrations. That way, the learners can connect with the format that works best for them. It also helps to use plain English and culturally respectful language. And maybe where needed, provide this translation so learners can fully understand the material. And for digital access, accessibility is the key. Sorry, for digital resources, accessibility is the key. And that means things like captions on videos, alt text for images, and making sure material works with screen readers. And finally, it's important to link new ideas to prior knowledge and real-world context. When learners can connect the new content to what they already know and what they've experienced in their own lives, then the learning sticks and it makes sense. And lastly, action and expression, the how of learning. This is about how learners show us what they know. So flexibility in assessment is really important here. As we said, some learners might be best at giving oral presentations, others might prefer written work, and others might shine in practical demonstration or a digital project. As long as the competency standards is met, we can offer more than one way to get there. We also need to make space for those assistive technologies. Tools like speech-to-text software or screen readers can make a huge difference for learners with accessibility needs. And that really need to be fully supported. Another way we can help is by providing those models, scaffolds, templates, exemplars. These supports give learners a clear picture of what is expected and allow them to build skills step by step, building confidence along the way. Excuse me. And finally, we should balance collaboration and independent work. Some learners thrive working in groups and others prefer to work on their own. So giving both options means learners can play to their strengths while still developing a full range of skills. And so why does universal design for learning matter for RTOs? Well, of course, it's about compliance. UDL links directly to the standards for RTOs, especially Outcome Standard 2.5, which is all about fostering inclusive and culturally safe learning environments. So when we design learning this way, we're showing that we meet those expectations. Second, it's about equity. Instead of constantly making one-off adjustments when the learner hits a barrier, UDL builds that accessibility into the design from the beginning. That way, everyone has fair access without having to ask for special treatment. And third, UDL improves engagement. When learners are given multiple ways to connect with and show their learning, participation increases. And this participation is important for learners from underrepresented groups, like our First Nations students, people with disabilities, and learners from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds. And finally, it's about retention and completion. When barriers are reduced, learners are more likely to stay in the course, build confidence, and complete successfully. And that is good for the learner and the RTO. Some really practical ways we can bring UDL into our training processes: provide resources in different formats, offer assessment choices, use diverse case studies, add visual supports, and write in plain English. Be flexible with our scheduling. Together, these strategies make training more inclusive, reduce barriers, and ultimately help more learners engage and succeed. There are some great resources out there if you want to dig deeper into UDL. We've got the Australian Disability Clearinghouse on education and training. They've got free UDL guides, case studies, and even learning modules tailored to both vet and higher education. Then we've got CAST in the United States. They're the original developers of UDL. Their site is full of detailed guidelines and practical checkpoints that can apply UDL step by step. And of course, we've got our ASCO practice guidelines, which directly encourage UDL principles. And they tie inclusive practice and reasonable adjustment back to compliance with the standards of RTOs. And finally, we could use the foundation skills training package. This could be used alongside UDL strategies to support learners who need help with language, literacy, numeracy, and digital skills. And so it makes the learning environment much more accessible. So whether you want big picture frameworks or practical tools, there are resources to support you so that you can embed UDL into your practice. Let's move on from there. We all know that every learner deserves to feel safe, respected, and included in their training environment. And for us as RTOs, it isn't just about checking a compliance box. It's the core part of delivering quality education. When racism, discrimination, harassment creep into our classroom, they don't just harm individuals. They also break down trust, push people away from participation, and stop learners reaching their full potential. So that's why creating a safe environment means being proactive, not just stepping in when something goes wrong. It's about setting clear expectations for respectful behaviour right from the start, calling out stereotypes or exclusionary comments if they pop up, and modelling inclusive behaviour ourselves every day. Ultimately, a safe and respectful environment is what makes real learning possible. When learners don't have to worry about protecting themselves from harm, they can put their energy into building skills and knowledge. And for RTOs, it's not just good practice. It helps us meet our obligations under the standards, under anti-discrimination laws, and workplace health and safety requirements. So when we think about racism or discrimination, it's easy to picture those big, really obvious stuff, like outright hostility, open harassment. But often it shows up in much subtler ways. The things like jokes, assumption, or those little comments, sometimes called microaggressions, they can send powerful messages to learners that they don't fully belong. And these behaviours might not be visible or dramatic as open hostility, but the impact can be just as damaging. They chip away at confidence. They discourage participation. And over time, they can make learners disengage altogether. And so that's why it's important for us as trainers and assessors to be alert to both the obvious and those hidden forms of discrimination, and to set the tone that our classrooms are safe and respectful places for everyone. When discrimination happens in a learning environment, it doesn't just affect one person. It has a ripple effect across the whole group and even the RTO. For learners, discrimination chips away at their confidence. It raises stress levels and it creates fear around participating. And over time, that can lead to disengagement or even withdrawal from their studies altogether. But for the group, it undermines trust. Learners might stop sharing ideas, avoid working together, and the quality of the overall learning experience drops. A discriminatory environment makes collaboration almost impossible. And for trainers and RTOs, letting this behaviour slide is risky. It puts us out of step with the standards, particularly around those inclusive and culturally safe learning environments, and it can also breach anti-discrimination laws. And beyond compliance, it also damages the reputation of the RTO as a safe and inclusive place to learn. So the impact is wide. It hurts individuals, it weakens the group, and it puts the organisation at risk. So that's why addressing it straight away is so important. So as we said, racism, discrimination, harassment in training aren't always loud and obvious. Sometimes they're very subtle, but they do have that big impact on the learners and the learning environment. So as trainers, it's important that we know what to look out for. One way it can show up is through verbal comments. Those racist jokes, mocking someone's accent, or questioning cultural practices. Like asking why sorry business leave should matter. These comments might seem small to the person making them, but they can make others feel devalued or excluded. Another way is through exclusionary behaviours. So in group works, some learners might be left out because of their background, their gender, or their disability. Sometimes students even avoid sitting with someone as they see it as different. Excuse me. So as trainers, we need to be aware that even we can unintentionally show bias. For example, favouring a student whose communication style feels more familiar to us. We also need to watch out for content and resource bias. If all of our case studies and examples show the same type of worker, say a male builder and a female assistant, we send a narrow message about where or about who belongs in that industry. If our materials don't include First Nation voices or examples from multicultural workplaces, learners may feel invisible. And then there's harassment and bullying. This might look like repeated put-downs, unwanted nicknames, or intimidation. In online learning, I think it's harder to spot. Learners might misuse chat functions to target individuals quietly. Power imbalances can also play a part, leaving some learners too afraid to speak up. So here are some practical things that we can do as trainers and assessors to create that safe and inclusive environment. So first, let's set ground rules at the very start. When learners help shape those expectations, like respect, listening, and valuing different perspectives, they're more likely to stick to them. And if discrimination does happen, we need to address it straight away. Keep it calm and professional, but make it clear that it's not acceptable, that quick responses show learners are in a safe space. And third, remember we're always role modelling. By consistently using inclusive language and respectful behaviour, we set the tone for the whole class. And be as flexible as possible. Things like cultural obligations and carrying of responsibilities can affect learners. A little flexibility in scheduling or assessments goes a long way. And use those diverse and positive examples. And keep an eye on the group dynamics. Make sure no one is being left out or sidelined. Well-facilitated group activities help everyone feel safe and included. So when we think about how RTOs can create learning environments that's free from racism, discrimination or harassment, we have a few areas that we can follow. First is zero tolerance. Be crystal clear in our policies and our procedures, and make sure everyone knows how issues will be reported and resolved. Provide education and awareness, not just having policies on paper. Staff need regular professional development on things like unconscious bias. And learners also need to have clear guidelines during orientation about what behaviour is expected. We need to look at respect and representation, about our everyday choices when making our materials and our language, using those examples and case studies, and avoid those stereotypes or tokenism. We need safe reporting mechanisms. Learners need to feel, or learners and staff, need to feel confident that when they speak up, that we have confidential systems and clear processes for investigation and protections. We also need to provide support structures. Learners should be able to access counselling, advocacy, maybe even cultural advisors when they need it. And we need to monitor and improve. This is to make sure that when we have an issue that arises, that we actually look at it and we do something to correct it. Creating that safe and inclusive learning space isn't about one single action. It's about weaving lots of small practices together. When we combine that respect, the flexibility and the cultural awareness, and we give some genuine support, we create an environment where everyone feels they belong and they can succeed. An inclusive environment doesn't just come from one thing alone. It's about weaving together a whole range of practices, and that includes our policies, our teaching strategies, and our cultural awareness. And the way we use learner feedback to support systems that we have in place. It's not just about what we teach, it's also about how we teach it, how we design assessments, and how we respond to learners' needs. And then how we deal with those issues when they come. So when it comes to creating these safe and more inclusive spaces, learner feedback is one of the most valuable tools we have. There are lots of ways we can collect feedback. Anonymous surveys, targeted questions, informal check-ins, suggestion boxes, you name it, we've got it there. Finally, we need to record all of this as in continuous improvement and ensure that feedback directly drives positive change. And it's not enough just to collect the feedback. We also need to use it effectively. And that means acknowledging themes that we hear and sharing those back with learners so that they know their voice is being taken seriously. We need to act on concerns quickly rather than letting them sit unresolved. And look for those patterns across courses. This helps us spot bigger issues. We've already seen learner feedback can lead to real improvements. For example, some trainers have introduced ground rules for respect after learners said that they felt excluded in discussions. We've included captions to videos to make them more accessible. And we've all looked at diverse case studies. These changes might seem small on their own, but together they make a huge difference in creating learning environments where the learner feels safe, respected, and able to succeed. When supporting Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander learners, it's important. An important starting point is recognising and respecting their cultural obligations. This might mean business, community responsibilities, or connection to country. These are not optional extras, they're essential commitments, and giving flexibility around them is a way of showing genuine respect. The second point is embedding perspectives into our teaching. It's not about adding one token example here and there. It's about weaving Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander perspectives into case studies, discussions, and examples throughout the course. That way, they're recognised as meaningful parts of the learning and not just add-ons. Another important step in building relationships with local communities. Seek guidance from elders or local organisations to ensure that what we present in the classroom is accurate, relevant, and respectful. It also shows learners that we value authentic voices, not just textbook examples. And we also need to avoid stereotypes and tokenism. Instead of repeating cliches, we should highlight the diversity, strengths, and knowledge of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. That includes traditional knowledge, but also contemporary contributions, whether it's in business, arts, or leadership. And when we put these practices together, we're not only supporting Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander learners more effectively, but we also create richer learning environment for all students. Everyone benefits from learning in a space that is more respectful and culturally safe. So, creating learning environments doesn't happen by chance. They're shaped by everyday skills, awareness, and behaviours of trainers and assessors. And so that's why trainer capability is so critical. Now, not just for learner success, but also for meeting those compliance requirements we have under the standards. To do this well, trainers need to understand learners' past experience. Remembering that some come in carrying trauma, discrimination, or repeated failures in education, while others build strong confidence and positive learning histories. Both of these shape how learners approach training, and it's our role to recognise that and adjust our support accordingly. We also need to be able to adapt delivery to diverse needs. No two learners are the same. By adjusting our methods to suit different learning styles, cultural backgrounds, literacy levels, and by offering flexible assessment and building cultural safety into our practice, we make sure every learner has a fair chance to succeed and without lowering the standards. Of course, we don't build capacity once and then stop. It requires continuous professional development, whether cultural awareness, learning about unconscious bias, developing trauma-informed practices, or exploring those frameworks like UDL. These areas give us tools to meet the needs of diverse cohorts. Equally important, I believe, is reflective practice. We need to regularly step back and ask ourselves, who's included in this activity? Whose voice is missing? That kind of self-check helps us spot blind spots and helps us make improvements. And of course, the outcome is worth it. When trainers are confident and capable in inclusive practice, learners feel safe, respected, and motivated. We see stronger learning outcomes, better relationships between trainers and assessors, and the RTOs are not only compliant, but they're safe, trusted organisations where students feel happy to learn. So as we wrap up, there are a few key points I want to leave you with. First, inclusive practice isn't just one strategy, it's holistic. So remembering cultural safety, UDL, trauma-informed approaches, learner feedback, and respectful support for First Nation learners all connect and reinforce each other. Second, learner voices really matter. When we listen and act on feedback, we shape safer, more supportive learning spaces. Third, trainer capability is critical. Inclusive practice comes down to our daily choices, our behaviours, and our commitment to ongoing professional development. And finally, it goes beyond compliance. Yes, it aligns with the standards, but at its heart, it's about creating environments where every learner feels like they belong and they can succeed. And that's what makes our work. So why don't you take a moment to think about everything we've covered today? Cultural safety, trauma-informed practice, UDL, learner feedback, and supporting Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander learners. Now, ask yourself this question. What is one action I can take in my own practice to make my learning environment safer and more inclusive? Be something small, like checking in regularly with your learners, updating a case study to reflect diversity, or committing to a PD session on cultural awareness. So I challenge you to write down your one action. And if you feel comfortable, why don't you share it with your group or a colleague? This helps turn reflection into commitment. I want to thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate your time and we hope that you found this session valuable. Now, keep an eye out for our next professional development opportunity coming soon. And as I said, all the resources will be available on our website and you will get a certificate of attendance. Thanks very much again. It's been great speaking with you.